Seen in the media some pictures of demonstrators not only protesting against President Morsi, or former President Morsi, I guess I should say, but also against U.S. President Obama, saying that President Obama allied himself with terrorists, with the Muslim Brotherhood, with a fascist regime, against the ambassador there, Ms. Patterson. I don't know how prevalent that is in the crowd, but how prevalent would you say it is that this anti-Morsi sentiment is also anti-Obama?
It's no secret that U.S. foreign policy is unpopular, not just here in Egypt, but throughout the region, throughout the Arab world.
That, of course, was CNN reporting. That was actually right from the streets of Cairo. That was shortly after the Mohammed Morsi had been ousted there, and it was pretty clear that it wasn't just, Morsi that they were upset with. They were upset with some of the stance and the rhetoric they were hearing from the administration. And now there are more developments. There appears that there could possibly be bloodshed as the Muslim Brotherhood, has issued announcements that they intend to protest in the streets. There's already been some bloodshed. Let's bring in Ambassador Frank Wisner, who's the former ambassador to Egypt, to get an expert opinion. Ambassador, thanks so much for joining us today.
I'm pleased to be with you.
Ambassador, you've seen the events as they've unfolded just before the holiday break. There was, obviously jubilation, people dancing in the streets. But now it appears that, there's still millions of people that support the former, former president. What do you think's likely to happen here? Are we in danger of a civil war? I guess that's what I'm driving at.
Well, I think we're in still very, very early days, and you can't predict what's going to happen with any precision. What is clear is the wave of anger against the government that drove Morsi from power enjoyed massive, massive public support, and the many, many millions of Egyptians who poured on the street and forced the military's hand to preserve order and replace Morsi and bring in a new constitutional approach. Now, of course, there's going to be a counter-reaction. There will be incidents. As I understand the latest reports from Cairo and from Egypt, there are incidents in Cairo. There are some in other parts of the country. But we're not talking about millions. We're talking about thousands at best, and maybe even less. So I'm unable to predict exactly, but I really doubt that Egypt is headed towards a civil war. I think the overwhelming support of the change is very clear. Second, the army and the police forces are lined up in favor of this change, and that matters a great deal. Many of the political leaders have stepped forward also in favor of the change, and the major religious leaders, the Sheikh al-Azhar, the great figure in Sunni Islam, and the head of the Coptic Church have both stood forward to support the change. So yes, there will be some trouble. The Muslim Brothers do enjoy support, but I don't think it even begins to approach a civil war situation.
Ambassador, when the reports first came out and we saw the jubilation in the street and we started to see the tanks move in, many in the press, including myself, said that this was a military coup. It seemed very careful wording by the president in his statement. The word coup was not used. Could you talk about the significance of that?
Well, we have a law in this country that we designed for a very specific purpose, and that was to discourage adventurous militaries around the world from grabbing power. In this case in Egypt, I think it's wise, and the president's wise, to go slowly and consider very carefully both what happened in Egypt and what is at stake. For in Egypt, it wasn't a military that plotted the seizure of the government and grabbed it. It was a massive public uprising that, left unchecked, would have produced great violence, would have left the military in the miserable position of having to control those demonstrations by force. The cry from the crowd was they wanted new elections, and they wanted a broader political dispensation that brought many of Egypt's groups together to help decide the country's future, which has been so troubled. That wasn't forthcoming from the Muslim Brothers. Morsi gave a defiant speech, and the military was faced with, genuinely, a overheated situation that could have been violent. I don't think any of us wanted to see that come out. Now, it isn't a coup in any classic sense, and yet the military played a role in upsetting the government. We have to ask ourselves, then finally, what are the interests of the United States? And here, I think the president wisely has waiver authority and has to make a judgment. Egypt is the largest and most influential country in the Middle East. Egypt is central to peace with Israel. Egypt's fate will determine the course, will influence the course of politics elsewhere in the region. So we want to be very, very careful before we go out and condemn an event that has, by the most recent polling of Egypt's best pollsters, 80% support in the population.
I think you hit on an important point, Ambassador. Two points that I wanted to make. One, I was surprised that, it seems that the Egyptian military certainly has the support of the people. They were waving flags, very excited that the military had moved in, and there seems to be a history of the Egyptian military having the backs of the people. But one of the striking scenes that I showed at the top of this segment was from the streets of Cairo during the jubilation, big signs being held up that were, I thought, very anti-Obama and the administration. Why is that? Well,
the word got out on the streets of Cairo that the United States was supporting Morsi and his government when the overwhelming majority of the crowds in the streets were against precisely that. I think that was, however, an emotional, short-term reaction, though it was very deeply felt that we had taken sides. I thought the president's statement was very clear and extremely helpful.
Ambassador, I'm going to have to, Ambassador, I'm going to have to cut it off there. We are running out of time. We're going to have you back again soon. Thank you so